Hey guys, so I honestly don't know if posting this is a terrible idea, but me and my boss found something a few days ago and things have been getting weirder ever since. I'm not joking, and before anyone says this is fake or some ARG or creepypasta thing, I genuinely wish it was because my life would be way easier right now. I work at a quick check in Scotch Plains. Started as a temporary summer job after college, and somehow, 3 years later, I'm still there doing overnight shifts because my art degree turned out to be completely useless. Most nights are boring. Drunk customers, burnt coffee, cleaning counters at 4 in the morning while questioning every decision that led me there. That morning started the exact same way. Around 5 a.m., the store had been empty for maybe half an hour except for Dale buying his usual coffee. Then my boss Mike walked in, stopped near the counter, and immediately started sniffing the air. "Jay, did you spill something?" he asked. I laughed at first, but then I smelled it too. Something rotten. Sweet and sour at the same time. Like spoiled meat left in the sun. Mike grabbed a broom and started checking around for a dead rat while complaining about how much money he spent on pest control. A few minutes later, he called me into the storage room asking why there was a weird stuffed animal sitting on the table in the back. He said it smelled awful. I figured maybe Kevin from the night shift left something weird behind, because honestly, that wouldn't even crack the top 10 strangest things he's done. Mike told me to throw it away. I grabbed a trash bag and walked into the storage room. But when I got there, the thing was gone. Mike swore it had been sitting right there seconds earlier. We were arguing about it when we suddenly heard this soft, bubbling sound from above us. We looked up and both froze instantly. Attached to the ceiling was this pale grey creature with 5 long tentacle-like limbs stuck against the tiles. It had 2 large wrinkled sacs on the sides of its head and a small black beak that clicked quietly every few seconds. The weirdest part was that it didn't seem aggressive at all. It just hung there, watching us, even though it didn't appear to have eyes. Thick slime dripped from its body onto the floor below, while it made soft cooing sounds, almost like a bird. Mike whispered, "The stuffed animal." Somehow, that made the whole thing even creepier. Instead of attacking us, the creature slowly climbed down onto the table and started moving one tentacle through the slime it left behind. It was drawing something. Me and Mike stood there in complete silence while it finished a rough little picture that looked exactly like the Pringles logo. "It drew the Pringles guy," Mike said quietly. The creature made another happy little cooing sound. Mike grabbed a can of Pringles from the shelf and carefully rolled it toward the creature. The thing practically lit up with excitement. Using its tentacles, it opened the can and quickly ate all the chips before gently rolling the empty container back toward us. After that, it became weirdly friendly. We fed it different flavors, and every single time it seemed happier. Barbecue, sour cream and onion, salt and vinegar. It loved all of them. Eventually, it approached us and slowly reached one tentacle toward me. Mike told me to touch it. I said, absolutely not. He threatened my overtime pay, so eventually I reached out anyway. The second I touched the creature, it felt like my entire body froze. Suddenly, images started flashing through my head. Huge yellow skies, endless oceans under giant moons, massive alien landscapes covered in glowing plants. Then darkness, empty space, cold loneliness, stretching for what felt like forever. I could somehow feel emotions coming from the creature too. Confusion, fear, hunger, but also relief, like it was finally no longer alone. When I pulled my hand away, I realized I was crying. Mike looked at me like I'd completely lost my mind. I tried explaining that the creature didn't feel evil at all. It felt intelligent somehow. Lost, maybe. Mike asked if it hypnotized me or something. I ended up naming it Benjamin because it liked Pringles. And honestly, I panicked trying to think of a name. For a while, things almost felt normal again. Benjamin stayed in the storage room eating chips and climbing across the ceiling while me and Mike kept working. Then, around 6 in the morning, a woman came into the store furious because the milk she bought was expired by 1 day. She started yelling at me while I apologized and tried calming her down. That's when Benjamin crawled out from the storage room. The woman looked down at it and immediately freaked out. She started calling it disgusting and threatening to report the store. Benjamin's head sacs started vibrating rapidly while it made nervous clicking noises. The woman kept yelling louder and louder until suddenly Benjamin let out this sharp screech that echoed through the entire store. Every light flickered at once. The woman screamed and stumbled backward while Benjamin quickly climbed up onto the counter. Then everything went silent. Completely silent. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The woman grabbed her things and rushed out of the store, still yelling that she was calling corporate. Benjamin slowly climbed back down and disappeared into the storage room again. Mike and I just stood there, staring at each other, trying to process what happened. A few minutes later, all the electronics in the store started malfunctioning. The coffee machines shut off. The lights dimmed. Even the security monitors started flickering with static. Then one of the cameras briefly showed something standing outside near the gas pumps. Another creature, taller than Benjamin, watching the building completely motionless. The image disappeared almost instantly. Mike thought it was a glitch until we heard tapping sounds coming from the roof above us. Slow, rhythmic, like something crawling around up there. Benjamin started cooing softly from inside the storage room, like it recognized whatever was outside. We locked the front doors and stayed inside until sunrise, listening to those sounds moving around overhead. Right before morning, the tapping finally stopped. When we checked outside, there was thick slime spread across part of the roof near the back alley and strange marks leading toward the woods behind the store. Benjamin has stayed hidden most of the day since then. But last night, while closing up, I noticed something scratched into the storage room wall in slime. It wasn't random. It looked deliberate. 4 tall shapes standing together beneath a dark sky with a single arrow pointing toward our town. Mike thinks we need to call somebody. Government, police, literally anyone. But every time we mention getting rid of Benjamin, the creature starts making these sad little noises and hiding in the corner like it understands us. I know this all sounds insane. Trust me, if someone posted this online a week ago, I would have laughed too. But I swear, this is real. And right now, while I'm typing this from my apartment, I can hear soft tapping sounds coming from somewhere outside my window again. I used to think the sound was part of the building, that soft electronic chime. One short pulse from the hallway speaker, followed by the dull blinking light above room 307. Every nurse on the night shift heard it eventually. Most of them stopped reacting after the second week. The problem was, the patient in 307 had already died 3 days before I started hearing the calls for myself. At least, that's what the records said back then. St. Dymphna Medical Center sat at the edge of the city, where the fog from the harbor crawled uphill after midnight and covered the parking lot in a grey film that made every car look abandoned. I'd worked there for 6 years, mostly nights, mostly surgical recovery and long-term observation. The building was old in the way hospitals became old slowly, layer after layer added onto the original structure until the hallways no longer made architectural sense. Elevators opened onto dead ends. Supply closets hid sealed stairwells behind shelving units. Entire wings changed numbering systems depending on which floor you stood on. But routines keep places like that stable. Vitals at midnight, medication rounds at 1:30, coffee at 2:15 if the machine downstairs wasn't broken, chart updates before dawn. Small predictable rituals that made fluorescent time survivable. Room 307 used to belong to a patient named Eleanor Vale, 78 years old. Dementia complicated by pneumonia. Quiet woman, never had visitors. She rang her call button constantly because she kept forgetting where she was. Sometimes she'd ask me whether the rain had stopped even when the sky outside was clear. Sometimes she'd ask why the hospital was underwater. You hear them too? She asked me once during my 3rd week with her. Hear who? The people moving downstairs. There was no downstairs beneath 3 West. Just sealed maintenance levels no one used anymore. She died at 2, 13 inches the morning on a Thursday. I remember because I was the one who closed her eyes. I remember the clock above the sink skipping backward for a second right after she stopped breathing. 2:13 becomes 2:12 before correcting itself again. At the time, I thought exhaustion was making me hallucinate. The first call from 307 happened 3 nights later. I was updating medication logs at the nurse's station when the soft chime echoed through the hall. Room 307. The indicator light blinked red. I stared at it for maybe 5 seconds before realizing nobody else reacted. Marcus was eating crackers beside me. Dana was scrolling through her phone. "Aren't you gonna get that?" I asked. Marcus looked up. "Get what?" "The call button." He frowned. I didn't hear anything. Then the light stopped blinking. I remember feeling embarrassed. Sleep deprivation can do strange things during night shifts. Auditory hallucinations aren't uncommon after enough consecutive hours under fluorescent lighting, so I ignored it. But the next night, it happened again. 2:13 a.m. One soft chime. Room 307. This time, I walked down the hallway immediately. The room was empty, not just unoccupied. Empty. No bed, no monitors, no IV stand. Just a dark room with stripped floors and dust in the corners, like it hadn't been used in years. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the ventilation hum. The air smelled stale, forgotten. Then I noticed the call button cord hanging beside the non-existent bed, slowly swaying, like someone had just let go of it. After that, things began changing in small ways that were difficult to explain to other people without sounding unstable. First, the patient records disappeared. I searched the archives for Eleanor Vale and found nothing. No admission records, no discharge summary, no death certificate. It was as if she had never existed. When I asked Dana about her, she stared at me blankly. "Who?" "Eleanor Vale. Room 307. "There's no room 307. I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. But then she turned the hallway map toward me. The third floor ended at 306. No 307. No extra room. Just a blank wall at the end of the corridor where I remembered walking dozens of times. I actually felt cold looking at it. Not emotionally, physically. Like my body suddenly understood something my brain refused to process. That night, I walked the hallway 3 separate times. Every time, the corridor ended at 306. But at exactly 2:13 a.m., after the call chime echoed through the floor, the hallway seemed longer. Not dramatically longer, just enough. A few extra feet. Enough space for one more door. Room 307. The light above it blinks softly red. I don't remember deciding to walk toward it. I only remember standing outside the door and realizing the hallway behind me looked unfamiliar, longer than before. The nurse's station was farther away than it should have been. Inside the room, someone was breathing, wet, uneven breaths. I whispered, "Hello?" The breathing stopped. Then a woman's voice answered from the darkness. "You came late." I turned the light on immediately. Empty room, dust, nothing else except the call button beside the wall, gently swinging again. After that, my memory started breaking apart. Entire conversations vanished from my mind minutes after happening. I'd find notes in my own handwriting. I didn't remember writing, "Don't go to 307 after 2:13. She isn't the patient." The hallway changes when you look away. I started recording voice memos during shifts, because I no longer trusted my own memory. Sometimes I'd listen back later and hear gaps where audio distorted into static. Sometimes another voice whispered beneath mine, too quiet to understand. Then came the photographs. Every hospital employee badge had a tiny ID photo attached to the staff database. One night, I pulled mine up on the system and noticed someone standing behind me in the picture. An old woman in a hospital gown, smiling. Not Eleanor, someone taller. Her face is blurry in the way faces appear during motion. The next morning, the figure was gone from the image, but my badge photo itself had changed. I looked older, only slightly, like several years had passed overnight. Around then, the hospital started feeling emptier. Entire wings closed without explanation. Patient rooms sat dark and unused. I'd walk through hallways and hear distant conversations echoing from rooms that were completely vacant when checked. Marcus stopped showing up for shifts. Nobody remembered him working there. I found his locker empty except for a coffee mug still warm to the touch. Then Dana disappeared too, not physically, conceptually. One moment I remembered years working beside her. The next, her name triggered nothing in my mind except panic because I knew I was forgetting someone important. The hospital directory slowly simplified itself over the following weeks. 4 floors became 3. 3 became 2. Stairwells looped incorrectly. Windows showed fog regardless of weather outside. The clocks all froze at 2:13, and every night the call button moved closer. At first, it sounded distant, somewhere down the hall, then outside the nurse's station, then directly behind me. One night, the sound came from inside the supply closet beside my desk. I opened it and found a hospital bed squeezed impossibly into the tiny space. Sheets neatly folded, heart monitor unplugged, and beneath the blanket, someone breathing slowly. I slammed the door before I could see the face. After that, I started trying to leave before night shifts ended. It never worked. The parking garage elevator opened back onto the 3rd floor. Emergency exits led into different hallways. One stairwell descended for 20 minutes before returning me to room 307 again. I once reached the front entrance, only to find the city outside completely gone. No cars, no streetlights, no buildings, just dense grey fog pressing against the glass, while the hospital intercom quietly repeated, "Patient waiting in room 307. I think that was the moment I realized the building itself wasn't changing. Reality outside it was disappearing. The hospital remained because something inside it wanted me there. I stopped sleeping after that. Or maybe I slept constantly. Time stopped behaving normally. Sometimes I'd check the clock and lose 6 hours standing motionless in the hallway. Sometimes entire shifts passed in minutes. The silent presence inside 307 kept getting closer without ever being seen moving. I'd glimpse it at the edge of corridors, standing at nurses' stations after turning corners, reflected in dark monitor screens behind me. always calm, always watching. Its face is never fully visible, but I recognized the hospital gown. One night, I finally entered room 307 intentionally. I thought maybe confronting it would end everything. The room looked different then, not abandoned anymore. The bed existed again. Machines hummed softly beside it. Moonlight filtered through curtains that should not have been there, and someone lay beneath the sheets. I approached slowly. The figure was impossibly thin beneath the blanket, chest rising in shallow breaths. On the bedside table sat my employee badge. Only it wasn't my current badge. The photo showed me much older, hollow-eyed, grey-haired, admitted patient. I remember my hands shaking as I picked it up. Then the figure in the bed spoke without opening its eyes. "You finally remembered." The voice was mine. Not exactly. Older, exhausted. I stumbled backward. The room around me flickered like unstable film footage. Walls stretched longer, ceiling lights dimming one by one into darkness. "You kept answering the calls," the voice whispered. "That's why it chose you. What chose me?" But deep down, I already knew no answer would make sense anymore. The figure finally opened its eyes. I don't remember the face clearly. My mind refuses to keep it intact. Every time I try recalling it, details slide away like waking from anesthesia. But I remember the recognition, not fear, recognition, like seeing someone I had been trying to remember for years. Then every monitor in the room began chiming simultaneously. Call buttons, hundreds of them from every direction. The hospital corridor outside stretched infinitely now, doors repeating endlessly into darkness, every room labeled 307, every light blinking red. And over the intercom, calm and gentle, a woman's voice announced, "You arrived late." I ran, or thought I did, but the hallway kept folding back into itself. Nurses' stations repeating, elevators opening onto identical floors, my own footsteps echoing seconds before I made them. Eventually, even the walls started disappearing. The hospital simplified itself room by room until only the corridor remained, then only room 307. Now there's nowhere else. No city outside, no day shift, no memory of how long I've been here. Sometimes the call button rings from inside the walls. Sometimes from directly beside me. Sometimes I wake up in the hospital bed without remembering lying down. And every so often, around 2:13 a.m., I hear footsteps approaching from the hallway outside the room. A nurse came to answer the call. I always try warning them before they open the door. Most of the time, they don't hear me, but maybe you will, because lately, I think I remember your face too. I used to think the first time I noticed the game was when I opened it. Now, I'm not sure that's true, because I can't remember installing it, and that missing step keeps bothering me like something torn out of my memory. That night, I shut everything down like I always do. Computer off, headset unplugged, desk cleared, routine clean, final. I remember that clearly. At least I think I do. But when I walked back into my room at 2:13 a.m., the monitor was already glowing, already inside a menu, already waiting on continue. The game was called Hollow District, a low-budget psychological horror game about a night security guard in an abandoned city sector that doesn't exist on modern maps. At first, it felt almost boring. Same hallways, same flickering lights, same distant electrical hum behind locked doors. Predictable, familiar, safe in a strange way. The first anomaly was small enough to ignore. A street in the game called Morrow Lane, blocked off by collapsed buildings. Just background detail you could never enter. But the next day, I saw it in real life on my way to work, on a corner I had passed hundreds of times before. A street sign, Morrow Lane. I stopped so suddenly, I nearly dropped my phone, then laughed because my brain refused to take it seriously. Later, I checked maps. It wasn't there. Not on Google Maps, not in archived data, not even in satellite history. It simply didn't exist. I went back the next day, and the sign was gone, replaced by a blank wall, like nothing had ever been there. But that night, when I opened the game again, Morrow Lane was no longer blocked. It was accessible, and inside the game, the street sign was missing from its pole. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. After that, things started shifting in small ways that were easy to doubt. The elevator in my building began stopping on a floor that doesn't exist. No button, no label, just a slow ding and doors opening onto darkness. The hallway outside my apartment started feeling longer, like it was stretching when I wasn't looking. I counted the doors once, 12. The next day, there were 13. My neighbor insisted it had always been 13. Old photos on my phone showed 11, and the game kept changing with it, as if it was reacting in real time. Every place I visited in real life started appearing in Hollow District later, but simplified, flattened, like a memory of reality instead of reality itself. That was when I started realizing something worse. No one else noticed anything at all. I asked my co-worker about Morrow Lane, and he looked at me like I was confused before saying I meant the construction site near Ridge Avenue. Wrong name, wrong place, but he said it with complete certainty, like I was the one remembering incorrectly. Later, I checked Ridge Avenue. It didn't exist either, but he showed me photos, old ones, supposedly from last year, same places I walk through every day. And in the background of every photo, there was a figure standing behind him. Always there, always still, slightly blurred, like the image refused to fully render it. That night, I saw it in the game for the first time, standing at the end of a corridor that wasn't there before I turned the corner. No sound, no movement, no behavior, just presence, just waiting. After that, Reality stopped feeling separate from the game. It started feeling aligned with it, like both were sinking to the same structure. I began recording everything, trying to prove I wasn't imagining it. But the recordings weren't consistent. Entire hallways appeared that I never saw. Doors were already open when I remembered closing them. And sometimes, just for a single frame, the game would show my real window from the outside, silent and wrong, like reality itself had been briefly captured inside the game. That was when I stopped sleeping properly, because the boundaries weren't breaking anymore, they were matching. One night, I woke up and everything felt subtly off. Shadows softer, corners too smooth. Even the fridge hum matching the game's background tone. I looked at the monitor and it was off, but the reflection in the window showed a menu screen. Continue. I didn't touch anything, but it selected itself. After that, I stopped understanding where I was loading in. The game didn't feel like it was entering my world anymore. My world started feeling like it was inside the game. The hallway outside my apartment became too long, then too repetitive, then unfamiliar in a way I couldn't explain. People stopped speaking normally, not robotic, just slightly delayed, like they were waiting for input that never came. And then I started seeing it more often. The entity, not chasing, not attacking, not even moving, just positioned ahead of me, at the end of a street, at the bottom of stairs, in reflections that didn't match my position, always ahead, never behind. Then everything started collapsing, slowly and quietly, without warning. Buildings lost detail, colors flattened, signs became blank shapes, and distance stopped making sense. Sound disappeared, then depth, then memory of anything beyond immediate sight, until there was only one place left, the corridor, endless, repeating, familiar. I tried to leave, but every door opened into the same space, every turn folded back into itself, and at the end of it, it was there, closer now, not because it moved, but because distance stopped existing in any meaningful way. There was no threat, no violence, no chase, only certainty. Then text appeared on the wall, simple and calm. You arrived late. I laughed when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because something in me understood it before I did. I don't know how long I've been here now. Time doesn't behave correctly anymore. Sometimes I wake up inside moments I don't remember playing. Sometimes I hear my own voice speaking lines I haven't said yet. And sometimes, very rarely, I see something beyond to the corridor. A room, a desk, a monitor, and someone sitting in front of it, watching, waiting. I think that might be you, or maybe it always was. The first time the elevator opened on the 13th floor, I thought I had fallen asleep standing up. There was no button for 13. Everyone in St. Dorian Medical knew that. The panel jumped from 12 to 14 because the building was old and superstitious, and because patients didn't like seeing the number during surgery recovery. That's what I was told during orientation. I remember laughing about it with one of the nurses in the overnight imaging department. I remember her saying, "Every hospital hides a flaw somewhere." Then she looked confused for a second, like she didn't remember why she said it. I should have paid attention to that look. I worked nights cataloging archived patient scans in the sub-basement. Quiet job. Mostly forgotten files, dead names, broken records from decades ago. The kind of work nobody notices unless something disappears. Every night at 2:13 a.m., I'd take the north elevator from B3 to the radiology offices at 7. Same route, same humming fluorescent lights, same smell of antiseptic and overheated wiring trapped inside the elevator walls. And every night, just before the doors closed, I'd hear something above me. Not footsteps, metal instruments, a distant rhythmic clatter, like surgery trays being prepared somewhere deep inside the building. At first, I assumed it traveled through the shafts. Hospitals never truly sleep. But after a while, I noticed something strange. The sounds only happened when I rode alone. One night, around the end of October, the elevator stopped between 12 and 14. Not abruptly, smoothly, deliberately. The display didn't show a number at all, just a dash. The lights dimmed so softly I almost didn't notice. Then the doors opened. The hallway outside was dark except for a pale strip of yellow light leaking from somewhere farther down the corridor. I remember thinking the floor looked older than the rest of the hospital. The tiles were smaller, greenish, stained with age. The walls had wooden trim instead of steel guards, and there was sound coming from the distance. A surgical monitor beeping slowly, clink, metal against metal. Soft voices speaking behind closed doors. I didn't step out immediately because my brain was still trying to force the scene into something rational. Maintenance level, renovation floor, storage. But then I looked beside the elevator doors and saw the number bolted into the wall. Simple brass numbers, like they had always been there. The doors closed before I could move. When I reached 7, I asked the security guard at reception if there was a restricted surgical floor above 12. He stared at me for several seconds. Then he laughed too hard. "There's no 13 here." I told him the elevator had stopped there. He stopped smiling. The strange thing is, I don't remember his face anymore. I remember the shape of his uniform. I remember the coffee stain on the desk. But his face feels erased, like someone rubbed it out of my memory afterward. The next night, I checked the building directory beside the elevators. No, 13. I checked the emergency evacuation maps. No, 13. But something was wrong with the numbering. The distance between 12 and 14 on the schematic was slightly larger than the others. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough to bother me once I saw it. Like the building itself, was pretending not to have a middle. I started asking older staff about abandoned wings. Most denied anything existed. A few reacted strangely. One surgeon dropped a tray when I mentioned the floor number. A janitor quietly told me not to ride the north elevator after 2 a.m. An elderly nurse asked me very softly, "Did you hear them operating?" When I asked who, she looked genuinely frightened. Then she whispered, "Don't let them think you remember." The next day, she was gone from the schedule entirely. Nobody knew who I meant when I asked about her. That was the beginning of the real problem, not the flaw, the forgetting. Things started changing around me in small, impossible ways. Photos in the hospital archive looked different every time I checked them. Hallways seemed longer at night. Doors appeared where blank walls had been before. Twice I got lost trying to reach departments I'd worked beside for months. Then I found an old newspaper article buried in a scanned microfilm record from 1987. St. Dorian Surgical Annex, closed following electrical fire. The accompanying image showed the hospital exactly as I knew it now, except for one thing. The building had 13 floors. You could see the windows clearly. I printed the article immediately. The next morning, the paper was blank, not burned, not damaged, just empty white paper feeding halfway out of the printer tray. That was the first time I seriously considered that something inside the hospital was changing reality around itself, or maybe changing me. After that, the elevator began stopping more often, always at 2:13, always when I was alone. The doors would slide open onto the same dim corridor, and every time the sounds were closer. Wet ventilation hissing softly, wheels squeaking across the tile, muffled voices discussing procedures I couldn't understand. I started noticing details. The lights weren't electric white. They had that old amber hospital glow from outdated bulbs. The walls carried faded room numbers. Some doors had little wired glass windows. And there was always one thing I could never explain. The operating room at the end of the hall was always open exactly 3 inches. No matter how long I stared, no matter how many times I returned, 3 inches, and someone was always standing inside the gap, not moving, just enough visible to know a person was there. A surgical mask, one eye, darkness behind them, waiting. The first time I heard my own name from inside that room, I stopped sleeping properly. Not spoken loudly, not aggressively, just calmly, like a nurse calling a late patient. "You're behind schedule." I ran back into the elevator so fast I nearly fell. But when the doors closed, the panel no longer had numbers. Only one button remained lit. I pressed every other space on the panel until my fingers hurt. Nothing happened. Then the elevator started descending impossibly fast. My ears popped. The lights flickered. For a moment, I saw reflections in the steel walls that weren't mine. Figures standing beside me in old surgical gowns, their faces blurred by by static light. One of them leaned close enough for me to hear breathing through a mask. Then the elevator stopped. The doors opened onto the hospital lobby. Morning sunlight outside. People walking normally, like nothing had happened. I quit that same week, or at least I think I did. This is where things become difficult to explain because my memories no longer connect properly. I remember packing my apartment. I remember calling my sister. I remember driving away from the city at sunrise. But I also remember returning to work the following night, and the night after that. Sometimes entire days vanished. I'd wake up in my apartment with hospital access cards in my pocket. I swear I had thrown away. Once I found surgical gloves folded neatly on my kitchen table. Not modern gloves, yellowed latex, powdered inside. There were other changes too. The world outside the hospital started feeling thinner somehow, incomplete. Stores I visited for years disappeared between days. Streets ended in construction walls that hadn't been there hours earlier. Phone calls cut into silence midway through conversations. Even the city itself felt quieter every week. Less traffic, fewer people, more fog. I stopped trusting clocks after every digital screen I looked at eventually displayed 2:13. Microwaves, phones, parking meters, elevator panels. Always 2:13. Then came the recordings. I found audio files appearing on my work computer despite not having access anymore. Each file contained low static mixed with distant surgical ambience, instruments clinking, footsteps, breathing through masks. And underneath it all, a voice documenting procedures, calm, professional, clinical. The voice was mine. I listened to one recording 17 times, trying to convince myself otherwise. The patient continues exhibiting memory resistance, my voice said. Identity separation is worsening. The subject still believes he arrived independently. I nearly crashed my car afterward because for a few seconds I genuinely couldn't remember where I lived. That same week, I returned to the hospital intentionally for the first time. I told myself I needed answers, but deep down, I think something was pulling me back. The lobby looked wrong when I entered. Smaller, emptier. The reception desk was abandoned. Lights dimmed beyond normal nighttime settings. I passed 3 people in the hallways, and none acknowledged me. The north elevator was already waiting to open, like it knew. I stepped inside. The button panel only displayed 1 floor. No other numbers existed anymore. The elevator rose slowly this time, long enough for me to hear distant machinery somewhere beyond the walls, long enough to notice dried fingerprints smeared across the steel interior, long enough to realize there was music playing very faintly overhead, a lullaby. When the doors opened, the hallway was brighter than before, not abandoned anymore, active. I could hear rolling carts, footsteps, intercom pages muffled by distance, surgical staff moving between rooms, but none of them looked directly at me. They passed calmly while avoiding eye contact entirely, like I expected but not welcome. The operating room door at the end of the corridor stood wider open now, 6 inches. I walked toward it because by then I already knew resistance didn't matter. Every path in my life had started curving back toward this place anyway. Even my dreams ended there. Hallways looping forever beneath amber lights. Elevators opening and closing by themselves. Voices asking why I was late. As I approached the operating room, I realized something terrifying. The corridor behind me had become longer. The elevator was farther away than it should have been. I kept walking. The hallway stretched with me. The walls simplified as I moved. Fewer doors, fewer lights, less sound, until eventually only the operating room remained at the end of an impossibly narrow corridor suspended in darkness. No hospital, no city, just that room, waiting. The figure inside stood perfectly still, mask, cap, one visible eye, watching me approach with unbearable patience. Then I noticed the name stitched onto the surgical gown. Mine. I don't remember entering the room. I only remember the cold, the smell of antiseptic, and dozens of observation windows surrounding the theater, each containing people standing silently behind glass. Not strangers, staff members, patients, people from my life, all staring downward at the operating table in the center of the room. At first, I thought someone was lying there already. Then I realized the body on the table was wearing my clothes. Older versions of me moved around the room, calmly preparing instruments. Some looked exhausted. Some were injured. One, much older than I am now, none acknowledged me directly. A monitor beside the table emitted a slow, rhythmic beep. 2:13, 2:13, 2:13. One of the older versions of me finally spoke without looking up. "You keep arriving early." I asked what this place was. No one answered. I asked if I was dead. No answer. Then the figure nearest the table tilted its head slightly and said, very softly, "You were never the patient." Something moved behind the observation glass. Shapes gathering. More people are arriving, watching, waiting. The overhead lights dimmed until only the operating table remained illuminated. And suddenly, I understood something so horrible. My mind still refuses to hold onto it for more than a few seconds at a time. The surgeries were not saving people. They were editing them, removing memories, removing awareness, sending them back upstairs, simplified enough to continue existing normally. Some resisted longer than others. Those people returned to 13. Again and again and again. I ran or tried to. But every exit led back into the corridor. Every hallway bent inward toward the operating room, no matter which direction I chose. Doors opened into more elevator interiors. Elevators opened into the same corridor again. Even stairwells looped back upward impossibly until I returned to the amber-lit floor. Eventually, the hospital itself began disappearing. Entire wings collapsed into darkness behind me. Rooms emptied into black voids without walls. Sounds faded until only the surgical monitor remained. 2:13, 2:13, 2:13. Then came the announcement overhead. Soft, female, distorted by static. Final procedure delayed. Patient memory returning. The lights flickered, and for one impossible second, I remembered all of it. Hundreds of visits to 13, hundreds of failed escapes. Lives outside the hospital that dissolved whenever I got too far away. Conversations repeated word for word across different years. People erased after noticing too much. And me returning willingly every single time because somewhere deep inside I believed the next procedure would finally remove whatever part of me kept remembering the flaw. The last thing I remember clearly is standing inside the elevator while the doors closed slowly in front of the operating room. The figure inside raised one gloved hand slightly, not waving, not threatening, just acknowledging me, like we had done this before. The panel inside the elevator no longer had any numbers at all. Only a message glowing softly where the buttons should have been. You arrived late. Then the elevator began moving downward forever. Sometimes I still wake up in my apartment believing I escaped. I go outside. I drive through the city. I speak to people. Everything feels almost normal, except for the moments when reality loses focus around the edges. A missing hallway, a stranger wearing surgical gloves on the train, an elevator opening one floor too many. And every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., I hear distant surgical instruments somewhere above me. The strange part is, lately, other people have started hearing them too. Maybe you already have. Maybe that moment when an elevator paused too long between floors wasn't mechanical after all. Maybe there's a reason some buildings skip 13. Or maybe you've simply forgotten what waits there. The SUV headlights turned on directly in front of my tent. The year this happened was probably the lowest point of my life. I was 26, unemployed, drinking too much, sleeping too late, and somehow still convincing myself that things would magically work out eventually. My girlfriend, well, ex-girlfriend now, had finally reached her limit with me. Her name's not important, so I'll call her Erin. Erin had spent years trying to help me get my life together. She pushed me to apply for jobs, helped pay my bills, and constantly tried convincing me I was capable of more than just drifting through life. And for years, I repaid her by doing absolutely nothing with myself. Then one night, after another pointless argument about my future, she finally snapped. She told me to pack my things and leave. I still remember standing there in the apartment doorway, holding a garbage bag full of clothes, while she cried in the kitchen, pretending not to look at me. And somehow, even then, I still felt sorry for myself instead of her. The only thing I took seriously back then was camping. Ironically, camping had originally been Erin's hobby. Early in our relationship, she dragged me out on a weekend trip because she thought nature would clear my head. Instead, I became obsessed with it. There was something addictive about sitting beside a fire in complete darkness with nothing but trees surrounding you. No bills, no expectations, no responsibilities, just silence. Over the years, we found one campsite we kept returning to. It wasn't completely isolated, but it also wasn't one of those crowded tourist campgrounds either. It sat deep beside a lake with scattered campsites spread far apart from each other. That place became ours. So after the breakup, when I had nowhere else to go emotionally, I packed my truck and drove there alone. Part of me told myself it was about independence, that I was proving I didn't need Erin. But honestly, I secretly hoped she'd show up there somehow, maybe with friends or family. Maybe we'd talk things through beside the fire and everything would magically fix itself. That's the kind of delusional thinking I had back then. The first night alone actually felt peaceful. I drank too much whiskey beside the fire, listened to the wind moving through the trees, and convinced myself life wasn't completely falling apart. By morning, reality came crashing back. I woke up hungover, sweaty, and freezing at the same time. The campsite looked depressing in daylight. Empty beer cans beside the fire pit, half-burned wood, mud everywhere from rain the previous week. I sat in my fold-out chair, cooking cheap sausages over weak flames while staring blankly at the lake. That's when I heard another vehicle approaching. At first, I assumed they'd drive past toward another section of the campground. Instead, the SUV slowed down directly beside my campsite. That immediately annoyed me. People normally gave each other space out there. You could literally camp hundreds of yards apart if you wanted. But this family parked absurdly close to me, like they didn't care I was already there. A tall, skinny father stepped out first, then the mother, then two children, a boy and a girl, who looked maybe 8 or 9 years old. Even from a distance, something about them felt wrong. Not dangerous at first, just deeply unpleasant. The father immediately started yelling while unloading gear from the back of the SUV. Not normal parenting yelling either. I mean genuine screaming. The Harris family doesn't act like this, he shouted at the boy. The Harris family respects each other. The weirdest part? The kids completely ignored him, not like children ignoring parents normally. I mean, they genuinely acted like he didn't exist. The daughter laughed while throwing dirt at her brother. The boy responded by screaming insults at her that no child that age should even know. Meanwhile, the mother barely helped unpack. She dragged out one folding chair, sat down in the sunlight, and just watched everything happen in silence.